there goes a lunch hour, huh?
Yeah, but there's no time for lunch now.
They were irrelevant. They were completely irrelevant and inappropriate.
Yeah.
They didn't show what they purported to show. They didn't have it. They were just completely false. So
you argued, got to get rid of them.
Yep.
Did the judge agree with you?
Yep.
Okay.
So thanks.
Unindicted co-conspirator, as Reinhart referred to him.
That depends on the fact finder. That's something that surely the fact finder could determine that Bill DeWeese, and there's enough evidence presented, is an unindicted co-conspirator. I mean, that's a factual issue. It depends on the evidence that's elicited. No, I mean, the judge isn't going to make that determination. The jury is going to make the determination as to whether or not there's a conspiracy that's proven in the case, and the conspiracy can be with any one of a number of people. So is it possible that the jury could determine that Bill DeWeese is a co-conspirator? Absolutely. That's a factual possibility. Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
We might have 9 reps.
Might.
Regis, 3.
Guys. How you doing, man? What's happening? Tell me.
I am getting tired of it.
Today there was a motion, pre-trial motion from Clintock?
I wouldn't really call it a pretrial motion. It's a situation that has arisen because Mr. McClintock doesn't have counsel, and he's entitled to court-appointed counsel because he's indigent. He doesn't have the means to get himself a lawyer, and the court's been having a lot of trouble getting him a lawyer, finding him somebody who's willing to represent him and sit through this lengthy trial. So it's just an update. It's just a process of trying to figure out what the timing will be in getting him a court-appointed lawyer, and then whether there's enough time between the appointment of the lawyer and the trial date for him to be up to speed and ready to go forward in the trial.
Could this delay the trial?
We hope not. I mean, could it potentially? I suppose so, but I really hope not.
And what is the start date for the trial?
August 29th.
Okay, and the trial, it could be anticipated to go longer than 3 to 4 months?
I don't anticipate that. I mean, it depends on so many different factors, how long the cross-examinations are, what comes up in trial. I mean, we're hopeful we can get this done in 3 to 4 months.
Now, we had a lot of the defendant's attorneys in there in the room as well. Was there anything else discussed aside from that?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, they brought up that they were going to file a motion for continuance, but nothing of substance.
So they've anticipated that they're going to ask the court to delay the trial for
yes.
a period. Okay.
Yes. Why they were all there, I have no idea.
Okay. Thanks, Frank.
What about the meeting with Mr. Corbett? Mr. Resident Moore here just described was Mr. Manzo, Mr. Brubaker. The alleged comment that Mr. Corbett, General Corbett, told the parties who were there that Bill brought this on himself.
Yeah, well, what he seemed to indicate was that the persons who came over there to meet with him wanted to tell him that the bonuses were all...
convicted of stealing over $1 million of taxpayers' money in the form of bonuses. And I think it's a good day. We hope it sends a strong message to the rest of our elected officials.
And what message, could you elaborate on that?
To stop using the people's money for personal benefit, for their own personal ambitions and for their own political wins.
Did you overcharge in this case? I mean, there were a lot of not guilty verdicts.
No, I don't think we overcharged. In Pennsylvania, one theft equals all theft, so the fact that we charged 4 thefts per count is just the way to do it.
Nothing to read into the fact that he was acquitted on 46 or so?
No.
Didn't get any on the basketball counts. That surprised you?
We were hoping to get convictions on that, but we're very pleased. We got, like I said, well over $1 million worth of theft and conflict of interest convictions.
Do you think you would consider the bonuses to be the heart of the case?
Yes, always was.
And so that you're pleased that you got a conviction of those counts?
Again, we think it's a good day for the people of Pennsylvania. That's what's important.
Is it your belief, sir, when this was going on, that these people knew what they were doing was in fact wrong?
Yes, it certainly is.
Could you explain what must have gone on in their minds then? If they know what they're doing is wrong, did they think that this day would never come?
I don't know. I can't tell you what criminals think when they're engaging in stealing.
Any reaction?
Yeah, I really don't know.
Any reaction to the fact Mr. Keeper was found not guilty on all counts?
No. I mean, that's we have to respect the verdict of the jury on that. That's that's the way it goes. All right.
Expect an appeal.
Let them come out.
What happened to the charge, the deadlock charge? Did that also go by the wayside?
Yeah, it wasn't necessary. No damage. We've no notice of that. So,
What about the note that was sent last Friday that cited that motion that says barriers
you're getting one part of the note. So the context is everything. And the foreman had every opportunity to follow up. He didn't. So they've been delivering now, I think, another 10 hours since then.
Was that before?
Actually, it would be 12 hours since that note was passed. So there's clearly no problem at this point. He would have asked. He also was brought into court when the jury was reconstituted and given an opportunity to say whatever.
So that note came out before the 12th juror was at 13th?
Right, which is why he was brought into court, was to give him an opportunity, if there were any problems, to raise them. What problems raised?
What about the idea that the Superior Court has said you cannot replace a juror?
That's not what the Superior Court said. If you read the entire opinion, it said that that's not the preferred method, but if it's done, here's the procedure we recommend to be followed, and that procedure was followed to the T by this court perfectly.
Frank, you don't believe there's any issue of being deadlocked here?
No. I have no information to that effect, none.
Explain the reason why you don't think there's a deadlock.
We have no information that there was a deadlock. I'm not sure whose heat-oppressed mind that came from, but it didn't come from anybody that I'm aware of.
8 days of deliberation, Frank. What do you think? Is this the suspense building here?
It's unbearable. I mean, in fact they're deliberating since Friday. I mean, they've been reconstituted and they have to start over, so it's actually 10 hours at this point.
So that note that you say was out of context actually went in before the juror was added?
Yes. 4 hours before, in fact. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Let me give you a brief statement on the verdict yesterday. We'll take questions regarding that verdict, and then we'll discuss the lawsuit that we filed on the health care reform bill and take questions on that. Joining me to my left, to the far left, I'll make sure I got the lineup here right, is the Executive Deputy Attorney General for the Criminal Division, Rick Sheets. The Chief Deputy Attorney General on the prosecution of this case, in charge of our Public Corruption Section, Frank Fina. Chief Deputy Attorney General Christopher Carrazone, in charge of our Appeals and Legal Services Section. Senior Deputy Attorney General James Reeder, and Senior Deputy Attorney General Mark Costanzo of our Criminal Prosecution Section. As you know, we began this investigation after the news broke a story in January of 2007 about bonuses being paid to staff members of the Democratic caucus for doing campaign work. As the investigation unfolded, we discovered $1.4 million in illegal bonus scheme and other illegal activity, which centered on using state resources and personnel for campaign work. The investigation was placed before an investigating statewide grand jury, which recommended the charges that we filed. As you know, we charged 12 defendants in July of 2008 and have convicted 10 of those defendants. 7 have pleaded guilty, and 3 were found guilty by a Dauphin County jury last night. The grand jury found that former Representative Mike Vion of Beaver County orchestrated this illegal bonus scheme. Last night, he was convicted of 7 of the 11 criminal episodes, which represent his theft of more than $2 million of taxpayer money. 6 people have been convicted of participating in the illegal bonus program. They are Mike Vion, Michael Manzo, Jeff Foreman, Scott Brubaker, his wife Jen Brubaker, and Earl Mosley. We believe that justice has been served with this verdict, and that hopefully the people of Pennsylvania can have a little bit more faith in their state government today, now that these defendants have been convicted of stealing more than $2 million of their money. I also want to thank the jury for their thoughtful deliberations in rendering what is obviously a very important verdict. With that, we'll try and answer your questions.
Should people who receive bonuses that have been determined in court to be illegal rewards for campaign work, should they have to return them, or do you have any plans to try to force them to return them?
We've not formulated any plans on that as of right now. We're really concentrating on getting through this case, and we have a number of other cases. Let me give you, if I may segue into that, some upcoming court dates, just so you were all on the same page with us. We have a preliminary hearing this Friday on March the 26th in regard to former Representative Stetler. That's in front of Magisterial District Judge William Wenner. We have the trial on April 19th against Mr. Vion and Anna Maria Peretta Rosepink in regard to the Beaver Initiative for Growth investigation. On April 21st, again in front of Magisterial District Judge Wenner, the Republicans that were charged, including Representative Purcell, have their preliminary hearing. On May the 12th, there's a preliminary hearing again in front of Magisterial District Judge Wenner for Mr. DeWeese. Sentencing has been set for May the 21st in the case with the convictions last night. No sentencing date has been set for the 7 who pleaded guilty. Don?
What have you figured out the maximum sentences based on the counts that the 3 of them were convicted on, what they all face, and what you're going to recommend? How would you recommend?
In regard to Mr. Vion, the statutory maximum number of years under the convictions is 73 years. In regard to Peretta Rosepink, the statutory maximum number of years is 25 years. For Mr. Cott, the statutory maximum number of years is 17 years. Now, these are all subject to the sentencing guideline recommendations. As you know, in regard to at least 2 of those individuals, Peretta Rosepink and Vion, I believe a state pre-sentencing investigation was ordered by the judge. At the time of the hearing, we'll make our recommendations to the judge. At time of sentencing. At time of sentencing. Right. Scott? I'm sorry.
Sean Romali was acquitted in December, and yesterday Vion was found not guilty on all the charges relating to Romali. Do you guys feel like you still have the facts in that instance?
Well, obviously the jury didn't. We would not have brought the charge if we didn't believe that we could have gotten the conviction, but the jury didn't believe that we proved that case beyond a reasonable doubt. And as you know, the burden of a reasonable doubt is a very high burden. But we feel comfortable that we had the evidence to bring the charge and let a jury make that decision.
General, can you speak about Dan Rainiac and other defense attorneys who repeatedly outside the courtroom accused you of using this as a stepping stone to the governor's mansion, and that the entire prosecution was politically motivated?
Well,
speak to that.
I'm not going to comment on what other lawyers, particularly on the other side, have to say about this case. I will say that the men that you see over my shoulder, the men and women investigating the case, the agents, the other lawyers that have been involved in this case are all career agents, career prosecutors have been involved in this case. And whether I was here as the Attorney General or somebody else was here, when this case was brought to our attention, we began the investigation. It would be dereliction of duty for me to say, oh, we're not going to investigate it. And I have greatest confidence that these individuals did exactly everything they needed to do within the law. This had nothing to do with me running for governor. Brad?
General Corbett, have you started your investigation yet of Senate Republicans on bonus matters or any other matters?
Well, Brad, as you know, we have said all along that this investigation is an investigation of all four caucuses. That's all I can say right now, but it is a continuing investigation. I'm not going to tell you what the status is, where, with all these. That's certainly a confidential matter to us.
After the verdicts in O'Malley and Kiefer, do you have any concerns about the upcoming prosecutions of Mr. Stetler and Mr. Fees, whose attorneys have said that they feel the evidence you have against them is like the evidence the jury has found unconvincing in Kiefer and O'Malley? Again,
I'm not going to comment on what other attorneys say about their clients. That's what they get. Let me finish. That's what they get paid is to represent their clients. I feel very confident in the men and women. Again, we have a high burden to meet. We have the evidence. We had the sufficient evidence to charge, and I believe that we have sufficient evidence to convict. But there's only one way we're going to find out, and that's in front of a jury. But I'm not going to comment on what the paid attorneys for the other side have to say.
General, with the conviction of Mr. Leon last night, do you expect to see the big case actually go to trial?
Absolutely.
Where will that go to trial?
Here. I think I just said in front of Judge Lewis, April the 19th. Now, we'll see whether they want to go to trial, but we are preparing to go to trial. Well, the cost of the trial, it's very hard. I've seen reports, you all talking about millions of dollars. It hasn't been millions of dollars. These attorneys are here. Some attorneys that you don't see that aren't here, that if they weren't working on this case, they would have been working on other cases. If there's any true costs, it would be in the overtime that was paid to agents working the case, because this was a great deal invested in this case. I don't have the number right now, but it's nowhere near millions of dollars. I don't know where somebody got that. It's one of those things, somebody says it, it goes into one story and it gets repeated and repeated and repeated. And I think I have repeatedly said, from our side of this, it's not. Now, what lawyers on the other side have been paid, particularly by the caucuses during the course of the investigation, I have no control over. And I would suggest that you should go and talk to the caucuses as to how much they've invested in lawyers representing individuals.
There's a pre-sentence investigation, but are you going to recommend, do you have an idea what you would recommend in terms of sentencing?
I do, but we're not going to share it right now.
Have you seen any signs that the current legislature has gotten a message from this verdict and just the progression of cases about weeding political activity out of their day-to-day work?
I've seen some preliminary signs. I think some of you have indicated in stories that you've seen some preliminary signs where some of them won't talk to you in the building. They want to go outside the building or whatever. But we'll never know with this. If somebody wants to do it, it's always possible unless you have much more openness in government. And that's really what we need to do.
General, you lost the basketball dinners allegations, I think, across the board. If you won that, you could actually go back to the legislature and say, stop double dipping. You believe that was flawed charges, or
no? I don't believe that.
Embolden them to continue doing it?
I hope not.
Well, how does
I hope. Well, I hope you all get on it. At this point in time, was this double dipping? My personal opinion, absolutely. The jury didn't necessarily agree with that, but if I recall correctly, there was testimony in there. The House rules allowed it. Well, I think that the people of Pennsylvania ought to be encouraging the legislators to have greater accountability to how that money is being spent. I go back to the days when I was United States Attorney and I traveled. I got a per diem, but I didn't get the money until I showed the expenses. And why can't our legislators do the same thing?
There's a lot of evident testimony and statements in court in this last trial regarding destruction of evidence, obstruction of justice outside the grand jury. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, do you have an open investigation? Is this something where you see some criminal charges coming out of this?
I can't talk about that. This is an ongoing investigation. This was one phase of this. We can talk about what's come up in trial, but going into the future, where the investigation's going, we really can't talk about it.
That was trial.
I understand, but you can imagine that we might be continuing.
And in the past, you have said that you expect additional charges. As it stands today, in this investigation, broadly speaking, do you expect more criminal charges?
I believe there's a potential for more criminal charges, yes. Alex?
Critics have put it at only 16%.
I'm sorry, would you start over?
Critics have said only 16% of the counts yesterday were secure. They say that shows that there was some failure in the verdict. Do you agree with that?
No. Let me explain one thing to you. It's the way that the charges were filed. Remember I said 11, convicted of 7 of 11 criminal episodes. And if you go back and read the presentment, there were 11 clear criminal episodes. So 7 of those they found them guilty of. Now, some of that were duplicative type charges that when a prosecutor charges a theft, you charge it in 4 different ways. And in this one, it was theft by unlawful taking or disposition, theft by deception, theft of services, and theft by failure to make required disposition of funds received. It can only be one theft, and the jury had to decide which one it is. Technically, a jury could have said, well, it's all 4. But for the purpose of sentencing, they would have merged together and only been sentenced under 1 count. And if you go back and look at the jury verdict, and I'm going to look to make sure I'm right on this to Frank, you can eliminate 33 of those. Is it 33 counts?
Yes.
33 counts because of the duplicate nature of that. So if we set that aside, it certainly presents a different picture. But let's go back to the comment about 16%. I want you to take a look at, there were 10 of 12 individuals who committed, who participated in public corruption, who were convicted. I like that percentage number, okay? And the question, and the comment is, particularly with the 3 that were convicted last night, probably the most important charge they were convicted of, in my mind, particularly as a former federal prosecutor, is that they participated in an agreement and a conspiracy to defraud the people of Pennsylvania. We can't have that in our elected officials and staff.
Given this lineup you got coming in the next month of trial dates, can you tell us about how the other grand jury investigations of the Gaming Board and the Turnpike Commission are feeding into that scenario?
Nice try. No. I don't comment on the existing investigations.
What did you think when you saw a defendant in this case who was convicted of 3 felonies last night after he was convicted say to you, is this the best you can do?
I don't comment on what defendants say. He's convicted. He's a convicted felon. He was convicted of a conspiracy to defraud the people of Pennsylvania. That's all we need to say.
If we were cynical, and of course the press was...
The press is never cynical.
No. But I mean, this lineup of upcoming trial events and hearings and sure looks good for a guy running in the spring primary for Republican lieutenant governor, but I guess you didn't have anything to do with it.
For the lieutenant governor?
For governor, I'm sorry. Maybe it can't help but help unless you lose a bunch.
We don't set the dates. We didn't schedule one thing. And in fact, you know that this case itself, that just was convicted, was postponed at the request of the defense for over a year, Frank?
Yes.
Over a year.
We opposed all those.
Right. So, this isn't our schedule. This is the court schedule. This is the defense schedule. Scott?
Well, kind of along a similar line, I mean, we talked about this at the last round of charges about a clear line of what's campaigning on state time. Because obviously you have these examples of using state resources to do campaign work, but when it comes down to it, these are people who are fulfilling a job and they're also running for office. And in the most extreme end on the other way, I mean, you're standing here talking about two different stories that puts you in a pretty good light when you're running for governor in the Republican primary. So how do you separate completely conducting official duties and running, doing political work?
I think, Scott, I don't know whether it's been with you, Scott. I've been doing this with other people. There are two different groups here. There are the employees who are paid a salary, and they're paid to work on the state time. There are elected officials who are elected, and their duties are 24/7. There is no punching a clock. If many officials got paid by the hour, they do much better than their salary is that they receive. A political official elected can do both. There's nothing in all court decisions that says that they can't. The court decisions are clear, Habe being the court decision, that as an employee, you cannot campaign on state time. You can't use your state offices unless you take your time off. You can't be used on state time. And clearly this case says you can't receive bonuses for campaigning on state time. Now, how do we get Mr. V on? He's part of the conspiracy to use these individuals to do campaign work. That's the difference.
What did you think of the twittering and the electronics in the courtroom, both in terms of whether it affected the case for good or bad and whether it's good policy from law enforcement?
I haven't had a chance to talk with the staff here, and I think you've seen that. One of the ways that I did follow it was from the twittering. In fact, last night I was coming back to Harrisburg, following the twittering of you all sending things out and getting an idea of what was going on.
Did you ask them to call you?
Huh?
You didn't have any of them call you?
Well, they were busy. Now I was getting emails, okay, on the office BlackBerry. But I'm a traditionalist. There are some things that were surprising. The fact that there wasn't a request to sequester the witnesses. Had there been a request to sequester the witnesses, which I'm used to from when I tried cases in the late 70s and through the 80s as Assistant United States Attorney, there might have been a whole different take on the electronic reporting coming out. That went out the window. I will note that Westmoreland County has already passed a rule that nobody can use twittering or any other kind of electronic reporting going outside. If you want to report, go outside and report. I don't know how disruptive or not disruptive it would have been because I wasn't in the courtroom.
I've covered quite a number of these press conferences. I've never seen Pat Blessing come here. Why is that?
He doesn't like to come to press conferences.
You ask him to come and he says...
He doesn't like to come to press conferences. You know what? He does a pretty good job at what he does.
Yeah.
So...
While you did secure a number of convictions yesterday, the folks who, particularly on the Democratic political side, say, 45 to 59, are you going to look and just at a level of, did you bring too many charges when you're, obviously the 14 held up, but in your view, and you and I have talked about this before, prosecutors are supposed to convict the things that they're sure they can get a conviction on, not throw things against the wall.
I don't believe that. No, I don't believe this was throwing things against the wall. Sometimes your witnesses don't hold up the same way that you think they're going to hold up. Sometimes the opposition attorneys are able to punch holes in some of the things that are being said. But I believe there was legitimate reason to believe that those individuals and that testimony was substantial enough to get a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. But we're not all infallible. We bring the case, and the juries are the ones that have to make the decision.
Did you say whether you expect jail time for all three of those convicted?
Personally, yes.
You expect to recommend jail time?
No, he said, do I expect jail time? I said, personally, I do. We haven't said what we're going to recommend.
Do you expect at any point point, the grand jury will make recommendations about changes in state government or laws to reflect what they've exploring?
I can't comment on that right now. Okay.
Will there be any jail time for the 7, I think it is, cut the deal with them?
That's going to be up to the judge. Because if I recall correctly, their pleas were open-ended pleas.
That's correct.
Right? Open-ended means
That's up to the judge.
it's up to the judge.
Yeah, it's going to depend in some degree on what your office recommends.
Well, we stand quiet. The judge has seen the witnesses, and he'll make the decision.
Well, you can tell the judge that you don't believe any of them lived up to their bargain. Have they lived up so far? I know the Manzos are going to be testifying later on as well. But have they lived up to their end?
We'll have to sit down and talk about that. We haven't sat down and talked about that.
Any cases or any adjudications to suggest that using a campaign cell phone or a phone or a gear to make a government call is any kind of crime?
Right, it's not a crime. It's baseless. I mean, what's going on here is a simple act of accuse the accuser to try to get out of your own responsibility. I mean, this is what we saw in some of the other public corruption trials. I mean, any review of the history of this, any review of the people handling this case demonstrates that's just, it's nonsense. This is a game that's being played. It's political theater rather than address the facts and the law relating to the crimes that they've been charged with.
What about their interpretation, though, that the campaign law says, or the election law says, that you have to, any phone call made on a campaign phone has to be to influence the outcome?
Well, I would say just what I said in court, which is their interpretation is an interpretation shared by them, the 3 defendants. I mean, there is no precedent. There is not a single, there's nobody. There's not a judge. There's not a prosecutor. There's not a board of elections. There's not anybody in the entire history of Pennsylvania, the election code, that we can find that's ever shared that view. So it's baseless. I mean, we can't even find it in other states.
You're saying that no one's ever been prosecuted for that?
We can't even find a situation where anyone has ever even been accused that it's a violation, that anybody's ever even inferred that it's a violation. So that's how, outlandish this is. I mean, I think the most telling thing that was said by the defense in this case was when Attorney Locke said, everything was fine. I grew up here in Harrisburg, and everything was fine here until the Patriot News ran some story. And then Tom Corbett started investigating things. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that's true in a sense that it was business as usual until it was disclosed that millions of dollars in taxpayer funds were being used for illegal campaign purposes. And Tom Corbett did his job and investigated it and has charged a bunch of people, many of whom are now convicted. So it was a bad day for the business as usual politicians of Pennsylvania. But that statement really demonstrates a level of arrogance here. And rather than address the facts of this case, they want to, continue pointing a finger at other people, engaging in a near Nixonian casting of aspersions. I mean, I don't know that I can say much more than that.
That people were doing campaign work on state time and state resources.
I think it was a mix. I think in the morning we had a number of the RIT, the Republican Information and Technology staff testify. They testified a lot about the technology that was used. I think the testimony was, very straightforward today. Very good testimony today.
I mean, but a lot of it had to do with the afternoon, had to do with...
Yes, this afternoon, primarily, which is straight fundraising, campaign work type things, yes.
Okay, and then that's also a part of this case? I mean,
yes, absolutely.
So when you had his former executive assistant testifying that...
Yes, she did fundraising. It was part of her job over quite a few years. Yeah, the case covers a broad array of uses of public resources for campaign purposes and personal purposes. So you have the contracts for the technology, you have the development of different types of technology for campaign purposes, and then you have sort of the old-fashioned, I hate to say that, but sort of the standard run-of-the-mill, having employees do fundraising and do active campaign work while being paid by the taxpayers.
And but again, in her testimony, what's her first name? Donna?
Donna Hetrick.
Donna, D-O-N-N-A?
Yes.
Again, she was saying that around election time she was doing a lot of fundraising work.
Yes, I think she did it throughout the year, but certainly, as with all these employees, as elections would draw near, the level of their campaign work would rise.
But in her case, she said as much as 50%?
Yes. Yes.
Are you worried about the length of the preliminary hearing on day 4 tomorrow, and then with it being continued to May 24th?
We're not worried about it. I mean, we're gonna do whatever we need to do our jobs here and get this case held for court. We obviously like to get it done as quickly as reasonable, but it's difficult with 10 defendants, 10 defense attorneys. They're all asking questions, so we got to live with that. It's definitely going to go beyond tomorrow. We're going to have to reschedule the preliminary hearing for a future series of dates.
But that date was May 24th. Is that what the judge told you?
That's tentatively what we've agreed to at this point. Some of the attorneys need to check their schedules, but I think that's probably.
When does the orchestra start? When the cellos warm up, or when we actually have a maestro moving their hand? He's obviously the maestro. The fact that the cellos started to warm up, and Manzo and Brubaker had an idea, the orchestra could not have played without Vian being up there to hold the stick and move his hand.
See, that's why I asked. Cut off or change direction with a change to the top.
No, I mean it's a criminal prosecution brought by career investigators and prosecutors. I mean, there's no political influence involved there at all.
What about the argument that they're making here, or Mr. McMonagle was making here this morning, that you guys are criminalizing behavior and there's no clear indication of what the line is?
We've heard that argument frequently in the past. We heard it from Representative Habe. We heard it from Representative Vian. We've heard it from virtually every defendant we charge with public corruption, and that's simply not the state of the law. The law is really clear. You just can't use public resources to campaign. The example that was given is something entirely different. It's saying that because a public official does his job and does it well, that he ignores some kind of political benefit from that should be criminal. I mean, that's not the law. That's not a crime.
And what about their argument about consolidating the conflict charges? There's so many.
Well, again, I'll let the legal arguments. That's a very legal argument, and we think the law, again, is crystal clear that the Commonwealth has a discretion to charge it the way we charge it and proceed the way we plan to proceed.
What about their concerns that it would drag the trial out and confuse the jury?
I think actually the exact opposite would occur if we adopted the proposal they have, truthfully.
Why? What's up with these and others that you guys have in the...
It's a standard. Again, there's a certain amount of rhetoric going on here. I mean, and others is a standard part of the conspiracy statute. So if you could probably pull any information in the state where criminal conspiracy is charged, and the words and others is in there because it's part of the statute. So it really has no tremendous relevance or importance.
Why do you think the multiple counts would actually shorten the trial rather than...
I think they provide a lot of clarity. I mean, if you have one overarching conspiracy that's supposedly going to apply to everybody, but not, but then you have to go through with the jury and explain outside of the charges they're going to have. Well, he wasn't involved in this one. That's much more confusing than they have it right in front of them. Oh, it says here on the charging that he was involved in this one, but not these 10. I mean, if you just have one overarching, that is going to create the exact confusion, we believe, that they're asserting will occur now.
What about the idea of severing the cases? Is that not possible with the way the conspiracy charges are?
Under the law, we believe it would not be possible.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about the jury. They just did a fantastic job. Very attentive, completely involved. I think took the time to review all the evidence. Just fantastic jury. Just a great tribute to the system.
Are you surprised, though, that you got a conviction on every single count?
Well, I'm naturally a pessimist, so yes, I was surprised. But it's worthy of the evidence. I mean, it's entirely consistent with the evidence. I also just want to thank the team of people that I had working with me. I think that the citizens of Pennsylvania have been just tremendously well served by some of the people, and I want to thank the district attorney of Philadelphia County, who loaned us a prosecutor named Pat Blessington, who's been one of my partners in this thing for 5 years. He had left the office, he had gone to Philadelphia, and District Attorney Williams graciously allowed him to return to help us in this case. Just incredibly valuable.
Are you ready for an appeal?
Possible penalties are? I mean, what this might add up to?
It's a lot. I mean, I haven't sat down and
But many of these would be concurrent, wouldn't many of these?
All the thefts merge. It's just an oddity of Pennsylvania law that one theft equals all theft. That's why we have to charge this sort of cumbersome 4 thefts in every single.
So basically, he will serve time only for 1 count on each of the Aristotle, GCR.
No. He can be sentenced under each episode for three counts. The conflict of interest.
No, I meant the theft charges in each of those different situations would only be 1.
Correct.
Sentence.
Altogether, could you give us a range of what he's facing, or both of them?
No, off the top of my head, I don't. It's entirely up to the judge. I mean,
What's
the
maximum?
The maximum on all of them. Again, off the top of my head, I mean, it's in excess, I think, of 50 years. That's not going to happen, but it's a very high number.
For each of them?
Yes.
For each?
You think he would likely get more time than Mr. Vion, for example, or given all the charges?
I just don't know.
Do you know what the sentencing guidelines would put this? I understand you don't have exact numbers.
Yeah, I actually didn't sit down and calculate it. I mean, a conflict of interest, I'm just saying, I can give you a very boring recitation of the sentencing guidelines. I mean,
Frank,
put everybody to sleep.
Any irony that the jury came back on Election Day for these election crimes?
It certainly crossed my mind, but I don't know.
What kind of message do you think this verdict sends?
I sure hope a very powerful one. This is now, I believe this will be like the 22nd and 23rd individuals who have either pled guilty or been convicted of crimes stemming from the investigation into the legislature. And I sure hope that it's making a difference. I sure hope the message is getting delivered over there, that they're there for the best interest of the people and the best interest of the people only, and they should not be using the money of the people for personal efforts.
Is this broad investigation of legislative corruption still going on, the investigation?
Yes.
And Zimmerman, is that the last defendant, and what is the status of his case?
In this group, I believe that is the last. In the Republican House group, it is.
So he's severed, so his trial becomes single.
Yes.
When is that, do you know?
I believe it's sometime before the end of the year. I'm not exactly certain. The first tool that the defense seems to resort to over and over again is prosecutorial misconduct. And again, in this case, the evidence was overwhelming. It was just simply overwhelming. So the jury came back with a verdict of guilt on every single count. That was a result of the evidence. That was not a result of anything else. So, I mean, those allegations are just completely baseless.
Frank, just to clarify, how many counts was he sentenced on? Some were consolidated, apparently some were null pros.
He was sentenced on 40 counts, which were all the counts that went to the jury, and he was found guilty of all 40 counts.
That was 36 felonies?
36 felonies and 4 misdemeanors, including obstruction of justice and hindering apprehension.
We're looking at 4 to 12, $25,000.
I believe that was the total.
No, I had 15,000 fines. Would you? Okay. And you were happy with the $1 million in restitution?
Yes.
Okay. Even if he can't pay it?
Again, I think it sends an important message. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.